카네기 멜론 대학의 학생들과 함께했습니다. 인재들을 찾아 나서는 두 명의 헤드헌터를 소개합니다.
Come on, Moon, let's go. We're not producing people at a fast enough rate in this country to satisfy all the job requirements.
헤드웨이 법인 지원단의 게리 골드스테인.
How do you see compensation for this job?
그리고 크리스천 앤 팀버스의 제프 크리스찬.
That's just our business. Tracking winners, finding them.
미래의 최고 경영자들을 찾아내는 두 명의 CEO를 만나보시죠.
Exclusive national funding for this program is provided by A.T. Kearney, a global management consulting firm helping businesses achieve results with capabilities in strategy, operations, and technology. A.T. Kearney, right there with you.
이제 사회자이자 CNN의 상임 분석가인 제프 그린필드를 만나보시죠.
Thank you. Thanks. Welcome to CEO Exchange. I'm Jeff Greenfield. Okay, if it really is a jungle out there in corporate America, then you are about to meet two prominent game hunters who roam the Silicon Valleys and Wall Street alleys and the Amazon.com rivers in search of their prey. How do you like that for a metaphor? They may be called on to find talent for new economy companies that have made their first billion in their IPO and haven't a clue about what to do next. Or they may be asked to help old economy companies that are struggling to keep their top executives and middle managers from jumping ship to pursue the lure of the dot-com sirens. Whatever the need, if today's CEOs are, as they have been called this decade's movie stars, then these headhunters are today's kingmakers, the hot Hollywood agents of the business world. Gary Goldstien is CEO of Headway Corporate Resources. It specializes in filling the needs of Wall Street, the banks, the brokerage houses, the insurance firms. His clients are so in need of talent that he literally has gone to China for help. And we'll be talking with Gary later in the show. But first you'll meet Jeffrey Christian. He's the chairman and CEO of Christian & Timbers. His firm drew the media spotlight when it led the search for Carly Fiorina, the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, the first woman ever to head a major computer company. His services in the Silicon Valley job market are so sought after that he now sits on the board of two companies and can ask for and get a piece of the companies he helps staff.
Well, this place is a mess. This happens when you've got construction going on.
제프 크리스찬은 마치 끊임없이 움직이는 기계처럼 보입니다. 헤드헌팅 업계에서는 시간은 돈이니까요. 크리스찬은 한순간이라도 놓치지 않으려고 하죠.
Hey, congratulations. I heard you got a search done in 17 days. When does he start?
I searched June 1st. Way to go, dude. Thanks.
지난 몇 년간 경제가 빠르게 성장하다 보니 그에 맞는 인력 공급이 부족하게 됐고 그 덕에 인력 컨설팅 회사가 활기를 띨었죠.
For the worker, things have never, ever been so good. And for the company, things have never, ever been so bad and so scary. And what's interesting about this, we're in the midst of the worst labor shortage we've had in modern history. So we hear all the anecdotes about CEOs being lobbied on private planes and wooed with new Mercedes.
Any calls coming in for me?
가장 많은 인력이 필요한 하이테크 산업의 전문가인 제프 크리스찬은 고향인 클리블랜드에서 떠나지 않고서도 언제나 적재적소에 맞게 인물을 고릅니다.
We started in Cleveland, but we started in technology. So we really developed capabilities to do search work in remote places without physically being there.
이런 능력 덕분에 크리스찬의 회사는 지난 2년 동안 미국의 헤드헌팅 업체들 중 수익의 45%를 내는 최고의 자리에 올랐습니다.
The problem is finding the candidates to move into those unproven companies. That's the hardest challenge. And Christian & Timbers has done a great job because they've been doing technology search since the early 90s.
How are we doing on the search? Who wants to go first?
The people that are credible candidates on this search, we've spoken with. We know who they are. We've got a relationship with them.
헤드헌팅 업체라고 알려진 채용 회사들이 받는 보수는 일반적으로 자신들 고객들의 첫 1년간의 월급과 보너스 중 30에서 50%를 떼어낸 거죠.
Hi, it's Jeff Christian calling for Bob Nephew.
요즘 들어서 닷컴 회사의 인력을 구해주는 회사들은 고객의 회사의 주식을 수수료로 받는 경우도 있다고 하네요.
you'd come back to me with some thoughts on it, and we'd kind of let it go quiet for a while.
1999년 리처드 오웬은 델 컴퓨터의 인터넷 운영 이사였습니다. 크리스천은 오웬을 실리콘밸리 신생 기업인 무선 통신회사 아방고의 CEO로 보냈습니다.
The first point of contact was in fact a cold call. Christian Timbers did have a name that was recognizable to me, and there was a certain amount of reputation that.
That's just our business. So it's tracking winners, finding them, and knowing when you've got a project where there's a match.
현재 크리스천은 오웬이 원하는 아방고의 새로운 인력 조사를 시작했습니다. 북미의 영업과 마케팅을 담당할 이사를 찾는 일이죠.
As you know, we'd sort of gone through the board's list of potential candidates, and we hadn't turned up anybody who we thought really met the bill.
How do you see compensation for this job? What's the range in your mind?
적당한 지원자에게 아방고에서는 기본 월급 20만 불에 보너스와 여러 가지 혜택을 지불할 예정입니다. 회사가 상장되면 1%에 해당하는 스톡 옵션까지 줄 예정이죠.
It's a big investment for us. There's something really there.
제프 크리스천은 닷컴 세계에서 활동할 사람처럼 보이지 않을 수도 있습니다. 한 가지 뽑자면 그는 대학을 졸업하지 않았죠.
In most cases, I would probably screen out somebody like myself. At least I would look more cautiously at them in terms of their background and what happened.
크리스천은 헤드헌팅 사업을 아버지한테서 배웠습니다. 그의 아버지는 클리블랜드 시내에서 오래된 직업 소개서를 갖고 있었죠.
So I ended up talking to my dad about possibly going to work for him. He suggested I ought to go to work for a competitor.
크리스천은 그 말대로 작은 취업 회사에 들어갑니다. 클리블랜드 외곽에 있던 회사의 근처에는 지금의 크리스천 앤 팀버스 사무실이 있죠. 6개월 후 크리스천은 회사를 사들였고 하이테크 산업의 강세에 맞춰 사업을 번창시키고 있습니다. 크리스천 앤 팀버스의 본사는 클리블랜드에 있지만 언제나 전 세계의 인재들을 물색하고 있죠.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman and CEO of Christian and Timbers, Jeffrey Christian. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Jeffrey, it strikes me that no one has a better view of the revolutionary changes that are going on in the marketplace, in the economy, than someone who is actually being asked by companies to find new CEOs and top management. Am I right in thinking that in a sense the whole world of staffing and searches has turned upside down in the relatively recent past?
It really has. Things are absolutely amazing right now. I don't think there's ever been this critical talent shortage. Maybe it occurred in the Roman Empire, but I don't think that there's anything been like it since then. It's one of the most amazing times. I've been in the business now for about 20 years, and there just are not enough people to go around. And my sense is that candidates today, when they go out and look for a job, can have about 4 job offers within a week as soon as they put up their hand to look for a new job.
You're not suggesting that, say, a newly emerging MBA might be able to have this kind of series of job offers dangled before him or her, are you?
I think that MBAs, if they get into the right marketplace and get a couple of years of experience, have that opportunity. I think the real opportunities today are for people that have been in the job market for about 5 to 10 years, and particularly have amassed some experience and expertise in new technology and emerging industries. Today, the real skills are branding, scaling a business, understanding the internet, and be able to predict what's coming around the corner next.
So, take us into your office. You get a phone call from a company. What do they tell you? Help, we need a CEO. Help, we've got so much money, we don't know what to do with it. How does this process begin for you?
Basically, we'll get a phone call from a CEO or a head of HR or a head of marketing who will call up and talk about a requirement that they have within the company. And our first job at that point is to find out if it's a company we can actually recruit for, a client we want. It may not be someone that we want to do work for.
Why wouldn't you want to work for somebody?
Well, we might not be able to attract somebody to the company. And today we're looking for clients that have top-tier venture capital, great boards, and great management teams. And if they don't have those qualifications, we may not accept the search.
So it's changed to the point where you might turn down a prospective customer, if I can put it that way.
Today we're probably turning down about 3 searches for every search we accept, which is, completely amazes me. If you were to tell me that we'd be doing that today, 6 months ago, I would think you were crazy.
But there's something that you're looking for. What specifically are you looking for?
Most clients really try to hire for experience, but we find that they hire for experience but fire for human qualities. So we're always trying to teach a client to look for what's important in a candidate, not necessarily what's on the resume, but for energy, drive, enthusiasm, intellectual horsepower, someone that you can trust and feel good about and has high integrity and is an honest individual, and great leadership qualities. And not be willing to trade off those qualities, but always be willing to trade off the experience. And that's a tough thing to get a client to get their head around.
Now, when you approach a candidate, particularly, and I'm really particularly interested in the environment in this year 2000, you come to somebody, and assuming that somebody has an IQ bigger than his or her waistline, they will have been reading the papers. Mm-hmm. And they see the kind of compensation that is now being asked for and gotten in some of these new companies. I take it this, too, is a change of revolutionary proportions.
It's incredible. I mean, compensation continues to go up every day. Last year, the typical CEO for an emerging company would expect about a $250,000 cash package, base and bonus. Today, that's gone up to $325,000, and you'll even find incidences of it being twice that amount. We just filled a search for a CEO, Bay Area company, about a month ago. $500,000 base salary, $500,000 annual bonus, and $1 million hire-on bonus, which is, completely out of the universe of what compensation packages have been.
And given what I've read, that's chump change, because you haven't talked about those stock options.
Exactly.
And I can see somebody say, what, are you crazy? I'm not moving for that kind of money.
Well, it's got to be stock options. A CEO will move for between about a 5 to 10% equity package, 5 to 10% of the company. And you really need to be able to show them, Jeff, that they're going to make $50 to $100 million in IPO, and then it's going to run up after IPO. So the numbers are staggering. But
stay with the money for a second. To what extent are the expectations of the candidates realistic, or to what extent, I'm looking through the paper and I see that the CEO of Yahoo made, in stock options and everything else last year, $1.7 billion. Mm-hmm. That's $1.7 billion.
Right.
It's a lot of money. That's like $6 million a day.
It's a lot.
And if this man goes to lunch, he makes more than most people make in a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you now go out and recruit candidates, do you find that some of them are literally almost asking for the moon, or are they in fact realistically knowing what they can get?
I think most of them understand the competitive scenario, what's out there, because every good candidate is getting multiple offers. And a CEO candidate for a new company really needs to be able to understand when's the IPO going to happen, and what's the valuation going to be, and what's my stock going to be worth. And those are some of the questions that they ask. Before it used to be, well, what do we need to do to get to market? What do we need to do to get profits? What do we need to do to generate revenue and to grow? Today it's all about the IPO and what happens after.
But isn't that in the long run a problem? I mean, if you now have your potentially next generation of top CEOs so focused on that question, as opposed to these earlier questions, doesn't that raise some rather troublesome questions about where these companies are going to be in 2 or 3 years?
Well, I think that if you're not focused on the business fundamentals, which is how do you win in the marketplace, how do you beat the competition, how do you really innovate and come up with new products and services that nobody else has, you actually have the chance of losing out to someone that does focus on the business principles.
Now, let's say you find your candidate, what happens now?
First off, there's an instinctive feeling when you first sit down with someone. Do I like him? Does he seem like he's a good guy? But what I really spend my time in doing, Jeff, is understanding how they get things done. And what I try to find out is if it's real or not. Were they just there for the ride, or did they really figure out how to turn something around, build something, grow something? The best candidates, when you look at their backgrounds, they only move up in their career. They never plateau. And when you bullet down into any particular job, you'll find a methodology that they've employed in every role they've had.
But I've spoken to a number of folks who say that sometimes the best lessons they've learned is from failure. Do you mean that if you're interviewing a guy and you discover that somewhere along the line he or she has crashed and burned with a project, that's it, you won't consider them?
If you've failed twice, you're most likely not going to be considered. Your chance of being a marquee name at that time is greatly diminished. But it's usually 2 strikes and you're out.
So Abe Lincoln, who lost a congressional seat and a Senate seat, if you were interviewing for president, wouldn't have made it.
I think politics are probably different than business.
On the assumption that you have not batted 1,000, that at some point in your career you have made a misjudgment.
Sure.
No more than 2, because that's all you're allowed.
Yep.
What's been the source of it? When you look back and you think, I got that person wrong, what fooled you? Or what did you not take into account that you now always do?
I think most bad hires for myself, and there have been hopefully few, and for also my clients are when something's bothered them, that they're not listening to their instincts. They've focused too much time on experience and not enough time on who the person really is. I think CEOs in general and search committees don't necessarily take as much time as they should and make this their number one priority. Clients are their number one priority. Analysts are their number one priority. Don't expect candidates to come to see you and get on their time schedule. I tell them, throw out all the references that we do and only rely on your own reference checks and your own due diligence. And only rely on third-party references. Don't rely on the references that they give you. Spend the extra time to find out if everything's really right.
In terms of your own compensation, you as a search firm can take a portion of that as a fee?
Yes, our fee also includes some percentage of equity. And it's really interesting because we take that equity and we split it amongst everybody in the company, administrative staff, marketing, research, finance, and it really helps to align incentives with our clients. And they actually like the idea when they know that who the equity is being shared with. So it's very interesting.
Okay, Jeffrey, thank you very much for talking with us. You're going to come back and join us in a bit. Thank you very much. Jeff will be back later in the show. Our next guest is Gary Goldstien. He's the chairman and CEO of Headway Corporate Resources. Goldstien built his publicly traded company with revenues of nearly $400 million from the bottom up. But recently, the Economist Intelligence Unit named his high-end executive search company, the Whitney Group, the #1 global financial services search firm.
I got it.
게리 골드스테인은 뉴욕 근교의 베드포드 힐스에 있는 자신의 집에서 에마 문댄스를 탈 때조차도 모든 것을 빠르게 진행시키는 태도를 버리지 못합니다. 골드스테인은 승마를 하며 배운 교훈을 최고의 자리에 맞는 인재를 찾는 일에도 적용을 하죠.
Well, this is the ultimate teamwork. And like many businesses, you need to have someone who is the leader, and you need to have very defined roles. But if you're out of sync and one wants to be the leader and the other doesn't want that one to be the leader, you've got a problem. Our job is to basically find the riders. Hey Ray, how you doing?
요즘 게리 골드스테인과 헤드웨이 법인 지원단은 탄탄대로를 달리고 있죠. 헤드웨이 산하 전문 인력 컨설팅 업체인 휘트니 그룹은 메릴 린치나 골드만삭스 같은 재무 분야의 최고 인재들을 채용하는 일을 토대로 사업을 확장해가고 있습니다. 이제는 전자상거래 분야까지 다루고 있죠.
When an applicant is updated, or the candidate profile is updated in Asia, immediately you'll be able to see that update.
아시아와 유럽에도 지점을 두고 있는 휘트니 그룹은 국제 채용 시장에서 활발한 활동을 하며 최고의 헤드헌팅 업체로 뽑히기도 했습니다.
Whitney Group has always been in financial services, which has done extremely well in the past few years, and their other strategy has been to branch into the European market. So going global makes sense. Plus, with the explosion of the internet in Latin America, Asia, and Europe, that'll bring more e-commerce opportunities abroad.
은행이나 중개소 같은 소위 오래된 경제회사들은 하이테크 신생 기업들이 제시하는 가진 혜택과 스톡옵션에 매료된 간부와 직원들을 불러들이기 위해서 술래잡기를 해야 합니다.
Companies are in a box, and we're now living in a time where an employee can actually storm into a boss's office, demand things that would have seemed ludicrous and preposterous 10 years ago, and get them, and that's amazing.
그러나 골드스테인은 토끼를 이기는 거북이처럼 인재들이 좋아할 만한 전통적인 회사들을 많이 발견했습니다.
A lot of people were jumping at the opportunity to strike gold. It was a gold rush. I think today people are much more discerning and cautious as they've seen many of these not play out.
현재 경제 상황으로선 임시 취업 회사인 맨파워에서 해마다 하는 조사에 따르면 경기 둔화의 조짐은 보이지 않습니다.
We found that over 30% of the employers surveyed across the country are planning to increase their hiring activity in the coming quarter, and I would say for the coming year. We're expecting no relief in the shortage of employees until at least the year 2005.
And could you please call 511 and 501, please?
높은 수준의 인력조사 회사로서는 특이하게도 골드스테인은 90년대 중반 자신의 회사와 임시직과 계약직 직원들을 전문으로 하는 여러 중개소를 합병했습니다. 지금은 이들 모두 헤드웨이 법인 지원단이라는 이름 아래 운영이 됩니다. 탄력성 있는 노동력을 채용한다는 점이 몸을 사리는 기업들의 호감을 샀죠.
They're afraid to bring in permanent employees and build up a lot of these areas, given the economy that we have today, with the expectation that it may not be there in 6 months or a year or 2 years.
뉴욕주 로체스터에서 자란 게리 골드스테인은 타고난 영업사원이었습니다. 10대 때 이미 그는 정장 양복을 팔았죠.
Being a headhunter is really the ultimate sale. There is no other product in the world that has to be convinced as to where it's going to be sold. If I wanted to sell you this pen, you and I will negotiate what you think the value of that pen is and we'll come to terms, but the pen has no say in the matter. Can you imagine if the pen said, I don't want to work for that guy? And by the way, you're selling me too cheap.
How's the book coming?
I just had this amazing interview, actually. You want to hear an interesting statistic?
오래된 식민지풍 저택의 집으로 돌아오면 골드스테인의 아내인 질 블록을 만날 수 있습니다. 블록은 텔레비전 기자 일을 잠시 관두고 사랑하던 이들과 사별한 사람들에 대한 책을 쓰고 있죠. 이들의 세 자녀 중 막내인 아들 파커에게 아버지의 일을 이어받을 거냐고 묻는다는 건 조금 이른 듯하네요. 하지만 헤드헌팅 업계가 지금보다 더 좋아진다면 게리 골드스테인의 앞날이 밝다는 건 확실하군요.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Chairman and CEO of Headway Corporate Resources, Gary Goldstien.
Thank you.
Gary, you are, in a sense, at the other end of the dilemma that we were talking about a moment ago with Jeffrey. You largely help financial services, banks, brokerage houses, insurance companies. Now, I've been reading all these stories that there's a kind of flight of talent from these old established companies to the dot-coms. They're losing people bringing home millions of dollars a year in take-home pay who are leaving for startups because they can make literally, if it works, $1 billion. Accountants aren't showing up the way they used to. How real is this? I mean, how big a brain drain is going on Wall Street because of the dot-coms?
This is a serious problem, I think, for many of the Wall Street firms, particularly at the associate and vice president level, where many of these individuals whose peers in business school have gone off and started up ventures with the stock options and the IPOs that they've underwent in the last couple of years are now worth $20, $50, $100 million. And what at the time looked like a very good career choice to go to Wall Street and make significant cash compensation, there's a certain dot-com envy factor that's driving a lot of these guys to leave Wall Street and try to do something in the dot-com world.
So here you are trying to recruit someone for a financial services company. And in another era, this was the dream, right? I'm not going to law school. I'm going to Wall Street and make a fortune. Now they'll say to you, well, thank you very much, but there's Mirage.com out there, and if that hits, I'm going to be worth $100 million in a year. I'm not going. So what do you say when you are recruiting a candidate for financial services who raises that kind of problem for you?
It's a very difficult thing to overcome, quite honestly. What I say to them is that we're at the very early stages of the development of this whole e-commerce economy. And there will be winners, there will be losers. There's no particular reason to jump in now, when in fact we haven't really seen what the stage is going to look like over the next couple of years.
It seems to me one of the problems with that argument is there are enough examples out there, even if they aren't a majority, where people have, in fact, it's like a gold rush. People have actually found the equivalent of gold in the Silicon Valley. It's there now, and I don't want to miss out. To which you say,
we're going through a transition right now. Many of these companies that appeared to be successful 2 months ago or 6 weeks ago or even last week are being scrutinized as we speak, and that could change in 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now.
So let me put it the other way. When you are searching for somebody to fill a top post in a financial services firm, you clearly can't compete on the upside with dot-coms that are offering stock options that could be worth a fortune. Are these financial services firms changing the terms of compensation? Are they doing things that they never would have done, say, 3 or 4 years ago to lure new talent?
The answer is they are. Many of the firms now are providing incentive programs that are equity-based for employees where they're allowed, even at the very junior levels, to participate in capital appreciation programs that typically would only be available to managing directors or partners in these firms.
So one of it is they're letting these folks in on things that they would have had to have waited 10, 15 years for, let's say.
That's right.
Okay. Now, there was a much talked about story in the New York Times a while back where one of the big houses on Wall Street asked a 23-year-old employee to write up what it would take to keep him and his colleagues there. And the list I must say, as a rapidly approaching senior citizen, I found somewhat interesting, bizarre. They included things like they want the gym open weekends, they want dry cleaning services on site so they don't have to take their clothes to the cleaner because they work such long hours. They wanted free food. They wanted discounts on their own investments. But my question to you is, if I'm thinking about leaving for the lure of tens of millions of dollars, is a weekend at the gym privilege going to keep me?
Well, it's not just the leaving for the financial upside. I think people are also leaving for lifestyle. They see their friends going to work in denims and T-shirts and sneakers, and they see them having a lot of fun in what they're doing. And the analysts that you're talking about on Wall Street are far from that. They're working 120-hour work weeks. They're treated basically less than human at times, and all they're really looking for is to be treated basically on parity.
Now, when you go and talk to your clients, because you're more than just a headhunter. You often are on retainer to these companies, right? You advise them on a permanent basis.
Right.
Have you had occasion to sit with some of these big folks, the guys in the corner office, and say, I need to tell you something. It isn't going to work the way it was. You have to approach even these young people who you used to be able to flog into submission with endless hours. You have to do it a different way now. Your corporate culture has to change. Have you said that to them, and are they receptive?
It's not a very difficult discussion anymore because they see the kind of leverage that they're losing. I mean, the reality is the leverage is really at the junior levels in these organizations. They do all of the bulk of the execution. If you can't execute, you can't get the deal. And if you do a lousy job in execution, you will lose every opportunity down the road. And so it's not a very difficult discussion anymore. They realize that. They see it. The question is, what is the solution? You asked me right at the outset, what do you do? That's a $64,000 question. In fact, it's probably the $20 million.
That's right. It can't be a $64,000 question.
It's a $1 billion question. And, there is no real answer. I mean, it's a very difficult question to deal with.
Now, I mentioned earlier that you have literally had to reach around the world to help supply talent. Why China? This is an unprecedented kind of deal and tells us something about how hard it is to find talent, I would guess.
Right now, it's estimated that in the next year to year and a half, there'll be 850,000 openings right now for IT specialists that we're not able to fill with people inside the United States.
For us liberal arts majors, IT specialist means?
Information technology.
Okay.
And so, for years, we've been bringing people over from India, Malaysia, Indonesia, various parts of the world where they have the technical training and they don't have the opportunities there necessarily commercially that we provide here. China has basically not opened their doors and allowed people to come into the United States for fear that they may not come back. We actually struck the very first joint venture with the Chinese government in Shanghai to represent Chinese IT specialists into the United States. The view is that we bring them over here, you get 3 to 5 years of experience with best practices, some of the large multinationals, bring them back to Shanghai and start to create a very elite labor pool of people that have skills so that large companies will want to do business in China and be able to tap into these people.
What makes you think they'll go back?
I think there's a sense in Shanghai in particular that they're on to the new industrial revolution. There's a lot going on there. A lot of companies around the world have expressed great interest in coming to China. And I think Shanghai really identifies very closely with Hong Kong, very much as a trading, entrepreneurial kind of region.
It occurs to me, I realize this is outside your frame of reference as a finder of talent, but it sounds like that if you could ever figure out a way to properly train young Americans, particularly in our public school system, to have any kind of skills like this, that unemployment problem would be severely mitigated.
Well, part of the problem is we have the tightest labor market we've ever seen in our lifetime. It's less than 4% unemployment. And those people who are graduating with engineering backgrounds and information technology backgrounds aren't interested in doing the mundane programming types of things that most of these companies need. They want to work in Silicon Valley for Sun Microsystems or some of the major cutting-edge types of organizations. So it's not so much taking our young people and educating them. There may be a partial solution in taking some of the aged, some of the people who have retired, who in fact have the skills and the ability to be retooled and retrained, and bringing them back into the workforce.
One point about potential competition for you and for that matter for Jeffrey. All these internet sites, Monster.com, JobsForGeeks.com, I think that's a real one, by the way, and all these others, are they a threat to you?
I don't believe so. In fact, I think most of the job posting systems that you see really only compete with the classified advertising. All they really do is let you know that there are these openings that exist. They don't necessarily do anything to fill them. By and large, my experience has been that most people don't necessarily use the internet to browse at night to try to find if there's something better than what they're doing right now because they're too busy. They don't have the time. It is a very effective means, the internet or the web is a very effective means to communicate with a client and to make information more available. But job postings in and of themselves don't fill jobs.
At this point, I want to invite our other guest, Jeffrey Christian, to rejoin us. Jeffrey, come on down. Jeffrey, good to see you again after the absence of a couple of minutes. Okay, now I want to try something here because the section that we're talking about is about, we've talked a little bit about the new rules or the new stakes that are in play in both of your enterprises. Let's say I come in, me, and I'm gainfully employed. I've done a great job at my company. I know it's hypothetical. And I come in and you're, let's say you've merged. You're in the same company now. So you're doing this interview with me. And it's a really big job at stake. What are the first things you're going to want to know from me? What kind of rules do you want me to know about? What kind of rules are you playing by in how you talk to me? And I want you to go ahead and do it.
Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you coming in today.
Look, I don't have a lot of time. I got a lot of job offers. What do you got for me?
You're out.
Okay.
That doesn't work.
That doesn't work?
No.
Okay.
No. I can't imagine anybody looking for somebody who's got a certain arrogance. So anybody coming in has to be at least open-minded to want to sit down and have a conversation.
Well, I actually somewhat disagree. I like people that are impatient. I like people that don't have time for me. I like people that have short responses, take control of the conversation early. Then I find I've got a real leader there. So I would almost disagree with that.
Well, maybe this merger isn't going to work. I don't know. But let's keep going.
Except that I think any leader has to show a certain diplomacy and has to have respect for whoever it is that they're sitting down and having negotiation with. I think, at least in the clients I service, and maybe it's because I'm more with the old economy, they do tend to care a lot about how they portray themselves in the media and in the marketplace. And there really isn't a lot of room for someone who has a certain arrogance and is so self-important that can't sit down and have a conversation with someone, particularly as it relates to something that may be appropriate for them.
What about I guess I would call it the surface stuff. I just read one of these endless books about how to be a CEO, and some of the advice was when you shake hands, make sure you grab the person's palm, not the fingers. Okay, I can do that. Sit up straight, which I've been told, all my life. Don't slouch. Maintain eye contact. Do these things really matter?
Well, I think the first impression is critical, and I do think a firm handshake is important. I think it's still something that people tend to measure. So I would agree.
I actually don't think that's as critical anymore. I think it's far more.
And I put these two guys together.
I think if you look at some of the most successful CEOs out there, they're not typically the same image type individual that you had maybe 15, 20 years ago. Anybody 6'5" who was attractive, who was a great athlete, very often in a sales or marketing environment found their way up the ladder to become CEO because they were the right image. Nowadays, you have to be able to converge technology and financial skills and a host of other things, and it's far more intellectually oriented. And so I find that if somebody immediately makes an impression as a very intellectual, very smart person with a great vision and can articulate his vision reasonably well, it's far more important than whether he's got a great handshake or dresses well.
See, I would have thought this is puzzling me because I would have expected you to be telling me that because you help staff those high-tech .com firms, and I would have expected you to tell me, no, these kind of, clubby sorts of personality traits are more important. What's going on here?
Well, I would agree with Gary, actually, Jeff, in that intellect, enthusiasm, passion for what you're doing, knowledge, expertise are really the things that matter. But what I'm trying to say at the same time is you've got to have a strong presence. You've got to look and feel like a leader at the same time. You don't have to have necessarily a strong physical presence to do that.
Okay, so keep going. What do you want to know? What do you want to know from me beyond? Okay, I don't have a sweaty palm. I'm not too arrogant. What do you want to know?
Well, I'd like to know how you define leadership.
I like Harry Truman's definition. Leadership is the art of getting people to do what they might not want to do and making them think they wanted to do it.
And how do you do that?
Fear.
You know, I'd be in...
I'm an old kind of guy. What can I tell you?
You know, I'd go back to one of your questions earlier. I'd like to know what some of your biggest mistakes have been and what you learned from them.
Now, do you ask that question? Do you ask that question in interviews?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Is there, okay, let's say my biggest mistake was, and we're talking about public mistakes, I assume, rather than the private lives?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We don't have time.
That'd be preferable.
We don't have time for those. So the biggest mistake might be, let's say, I was too impatient in trying to accomplish something, and it hurt me very badly, and now I have learned, I think, that I've got to take that next step. What I'm asking, though, is, when you ask a question like that, are you looking also not just for honesty, but for what people might have learned from that mistake?
Absolutely.
That's the key to that question?
Yeah.
Got that?
Though, however, I must say that impatience is a pat answer. You know, that's the answer for what do you think are your shortcomings. People will always use impatience because that's really maybe not such a bad thing to have. So then what I'm always really trying to get to is what the person's real weaknesses are. And do they have a sense of humility? Are they afraid to tell you what they don't know? You know, so those are some other things. So I might ask the question, which really helps me to get to that, but I shouldn't really give you the clue there. One of my favorite questions is, what do you think the misconceptions are about you?
Aha.
That's my favorite question.
That's a great question. Okay, let's say you were interviewing Gary. Gary, what? I'm getting a little uncomfortable with this.
Making it tough on me. I'm getting all the hard shots there.
What do you think your biggest, the biggest misconceptions are of you, Gary, as a manager, as a leader?
I'm supposed to be asking the questions here.
I can answer my own question.
I'll address it. I think there is a perception of me that I am all over the place because I wear many different hats. I do all the acquisitions. We've done 18 acquisitions in the last couple of years. I spearheaded all of them. I still spend roughly 50% of my time doing executive search work. I run a public company. I have to deal with shareholders. I have to deal with analysts. I have to deal with the outside investor community. And that I am helter-skelter, that I'm all over the place. When the reality is I happen to have very good people working for me and with me who function in all the various areas and disciplines that I need covered for all of that. And I really don't have to be in 10 places at the same time. But there's this perception that I take on too much and that I'm too out there. I happen to think I'm a reasonably good manager.
Now, hearing that answer, if you were considering Gary for a job, is that a good answer?
It's a good answer. And why it's kind of a trick question is that most misconceptions aren't misconceptions, meaning that they're real. So how others perceive you is probably accurate. And so most people think that things that are misconceptions about them really aren't.
Uh-huh. So if somebody says, well, people think that I'm a cruel and unfeeling person.
You probably are.
Whoa. You know, I hope you're taking notes, folks, because this is very... So, all right, now if you are, once we get past those kinds of questions, that is to try to figure out who this person is, who this character is.
Right.
I mean, what the character of this person is. Are you now at a point where if you are recruiting for a particular company, you're going to ask this person, all right, here's company X's biggest problem, what would you do about it?
No, actually, I would put it on you to tell me what you think their biggest problem is. I would provide you with some information prior to our meeting for you to basically come in reasonably up to speed with what the company is doing. And I'd ask you, what should they be doing that they're not? What are some of the frailties? What are some of the obvious weaknesses that you see that you would want to come in and change? And how would you go about it?
And I take it what you're judging there is not, it's not like there's a right answer. You want to hear how this person thinks.
That's right.
By the way, I have to be fair to you. You ought to get to ask Jeffrey a question. Turn the table. Not this one physically, but turn the tables. What do you want? What kind of question do you like to ask a prospective talent?
An easy one, please.
If you had an opportunity to run any company in the world right now, what would that be and why?
Boy, great question. Great question. You know, I might pick a large, complex technology company that had a lot of resources, but I also know that I wouldn't be capable of doing it. So I'd have to also look at my own capabilities. And I think what I probably would love to do, if I was not doing what if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now, would be to run maybe a medium-sized, white-hot, pre-IPO e-commerce company, for the obvious reasons.
I'd want to run Gulfstream, because all I want in life is a Gulfstream 5. But that's why I'm not
a great answer.
Yeah, well,
I love that.
Well, there you go.
That's a great one.
Before we leave this area, and thank you, by the way, both of you. The questions and answers were a lot blunter than I was expecting, so thank you. So I want to turn to a question from the faculty here at Carnegie Mellon. This question comes from Lester Lave, who's a professor of economics and finance, and it's to both of you.
There are many thousands of middle managers at the Fortune 500 companies who think of themselves as potential CEOs. What does it take for a middle manager of a Fortune 500 company to be a good CEO, particularly for one of the startup companies?
I think it's very difficult for a middle manager within a traditional or old economy company to find their way. You need to go into jobs within their current company where they're out on the front line, where the risks and rewards are both high. I think also they need to become extremely net-centric. They may even take a cut in pay to get into a division or an organization that's doing something in the e-commerce area or whatever is going to come next down the pike.
I'm not so sure it's the knowledge, because I don't think that people who are doing a lot of these startups necessarily know anything more. I think they perhaps came up with a great idea. And so I would encourage anybody who's a middle manager to try to come up with some ideas for your own company that, in fact, might enable them to be more of a new economy player, and test it out internally and see if, in fact, there may be an opportunity to do it within the confines of your organization. If not, and you really think it's a great idea, then perhaps go out and try to find someone to back you and see if you can start something out.
I want to move now to what's, I think, of particular interest to folks in this audience, and I hope at home, and that's the idea of charting your career. Let me ask it with the most blunt way I can. Are these people in the wrong place? Should these folks drop out, pack up, head out to .com land and try to get in on the ground floor? Are they missing an opportunity by getting an MBA?
I'm not certain that you can get in on the ground floor anymore of .com companies. I think that time may have passed and was about 2 years ago. I think there are very few niches left. I think that there's a lot of real estate that's already been grabbed in the internet space. But we've seen many, many people drop out and be successful doing that. So it's a hard answer. I think if you've got the opportunity and it looks like a great company and you know you can make a contribution, go for it.
Ooh. See, I actually don't believe that the whole .com game is over. I don't believe that at all. I think I look back to the early 1900s when airplanes and cars and railroads were first developed, and no one even knew about computers or about some of the things that have emerged since then. And everyone thought that, with railroads and some of the transportation and things that were built then, it was all over. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know 10 or 20 or 30 years or 5 years from now what new technologies are going to be out there, which make everything obsolete that we have today. And so I can't for a second believe that there aren't going to be huge opportunities for these people in a year, 2 years, and 5 years, that maybe they won't have the IPO component to it, which is a sort of here and now situation, which quite honestly is very questionable as to whether any of these or most of these are really ever going to materialize, whether people will actually be able to cash in those options in the stock in a real meaningful way and at the valuations that we're seeing. But I've got to believe that sticking with we don't know what we don't know, my best advice to all of you would be to go to a best practices company coming out of school, finish school, go to the best company you can go to with the brightest and best talent that you can associate yourself with, and do that for some period of time and open up that many more options to yourself.
But there's gold out there for some folks.
Yeah, but it's going to be out there. It's certainly not mine to the extent that people are saying it is. I don't believe it.
Well, I'm sorry, did you want to...
Well, I was going to say, I'd go back to your comments, Gary, about the value of ideas. And if you're in school today and you've got a great idea, and a group of you have a great idea, and you can get funding, and you can get some excitement in that space, and you know you're first to market, you ought to go for it. Why not? Because it may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
But that's different. It's different to have a great idea and to take it and test it. It's another thing to be looking for it, spending all your time focusing on trying to find that great idea and then rationalizing why something may be better than it really is. and missing out on doing something that perhaps long term is more fundamental and better for you.
Okay, let me turn to a question about this career charting that also comes from a member of the faculty at Carnegie Mellon. This is from Laurie Weingart, who's an associate professor of organizational behavior.
You've been talking about charting your career. Is there room in today's marketplace for a manager who has strong technical skills but weaker interpersonal skills?
You know, one of the worst things that I've heard someone respond to me in an interview is that they were not a people person. And so my question is, well, what kind of person, were you?
Invertebrate.
I guess, as opposed to a people person. And I also had a candidate that told me that they and their family tended to all go home, not communicate with one another, but just go right onto their PCs and communicate by email.
To each other?
To each other, right. Mm-hmm. And what's happened a lot of times is you'll get somebody who's extremely bright, incredibly technical, and they tend to go up just so far on a career track in terms of leadership and then stop. And if they're very valuable to the company, they tend to go into a different career ladder.
But one thing before we leave this topic, in terms, again, of the next generation of employees, managers, junior executives, leaders, is if you go to an interview and you sense that the culture doesn't fit you, whatever type you are, would you advise that person, no matter what else is at stake, to not do that, to just leave rather than take a job in a company that you somehow feel isn't resonating with your own values?
I don't think it's a good idea to go someplace that you're not comfortable. If you're in an environment that is counter to who you are, you will not be successful there. I think those people who are successful in an organization are attracted to it because of the people that they work with, because of the quality of the organization itself, being in simpatico with values and ethics of the organization. It's like being in a relationship.
I would agree. Unfortunately, though, most people don't get a chance to see the real culture. They get to see the culture that the company wants you to see. And so for someone particularly just getting into the job market, companies have put together all kinds of material and propaganda and interviewing structures and styles. And so I think it's actually very critical to understand what the real culture is. And what I would try to do is to find out people that have left and talk to them.
Let me turn to another question from the faculty. This is from John Thorne, who is professor of entrepreneurship.
I'm very much interested in the trends of search committees, what search committees should do in addition to what you do, and how you build a relationship with the search committee and the CEO and board of directors of the company.
What happens is, I think, from a search professional's perspective, is trying to figure out what's really going on the search committee. Are they trying to replace somebody? Is the CEO really retiring? Who's driving the search committee strategy? And some of the problems, I think the first thing that I would recommend to a search committee is that they name an outside board member as the chairman of their search committee and have that person lead it and drive it. And I think trying to make sure that there's an agenda that is shared by everybody.
Actually, we don't have an awful lot to do with search committees because of the nature of the industry that we focus on, but to the extent that we've had, it's been usually a pretty bad experience. And so it's usually a red flag for us if there is a search committee made up primarily of outsiders to begin with, and actually might even question whether we want to take it on.
All right. In a moment, we're going to turn to some questions from our audience here at Carnegie Mellon University, but first, some background on the Graduate School of Industrial Administration.
1949년에 세워진 카네기 멜론 대학의 산업경영대학원은 4분의 노벨 경제학상 수상자들을 배출한 요람입니다. 산업경영대학원은 비즈니스 위크지가 뽑은 미국 최고의 경영대학원 중에서 14위를 차지했죠. 2000년에 졸업한 학생들 중 3분의 1은 닷컴 회사에 취직을 했습니다.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn now to our audience of future MBAs, many of whom are about to enter the workforce, and hear what their questions are. For our guests, please tell us your name and then ask your question.
Hi, my name is Bradley Keir. Do you find that a lot of the firms that you hire for on Wall Street, the positions that they fill there, those people it's sort of a training ground for venture capital firms? They learn the financial skills and the management does the lure of the VC siren attract a lot of those people, and do you find a lot of turnover in that area?
Actually, you're right on. The other area that Wall Street seems to be losing a lot of talent to is the private equity marketplace for a lot of the same reasons. There's tremendous upside economically to go to a private equity firm where you get equity participations, even at the very junior ranks.
I would only add to that, we've found that we're actually doing 2 chief operating officer searches today for venture capital companies because they're so busy they need people to help operate the company while they're out doing deals.
Sir.
Hello, my name is Anish Kurapati, and we talked a lot about stock options. And please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think this is really something unique to the American economy. So the notion of stock options and equity ownership in companies. How fundamental do you think that has been in driving this huge boom expansion in the 90s?
Gary, the stock option, is it uniquely American?
It is uniquely American. You're starting to hear more about it in other parts of the world, in particular in Europe. I mentioned it earlier in the discussion that equity-based compensation has really changed the whole mentality of corporate America over the past 10 years. And in fact, I believe there are a lot of hidden costs in it that we haven't really seen that could be detrimental to shareholders. Used to be 10, 15 years ago, if anybody had more than $2 or $3 million worth of stock in their company, it was considered to be enormous. And now you have, at least in my sector in financial services, many people with 15, 20, 30, 50, $100 million of stock. Almost their entire net worth tied into their corporation. Now, when you've got that type of net worth tied up in your business, you tend to look at your business very differently. 15 years ago, it was sort of standard fare that businesses would support other businesses in down times or in good times, so that if the fixed income markets disappeared, other parts of the business would subsidize it. Now those businesses are being obliterated as soon as they start eating cash or start eating into earnings, which ultimately affect the stock price. And they may not necessarily be good decisions. They're short-term, quarter-by-quarter type decisions that companies are now making. And I'm not so sure that's necessarily a good thing.
Your name and your question, please.
My name is Devu Pandit. A lot of MBA students, especially second years today, they're deciding not to interview with traditional firms because they're interested in startup companies and .coms. How much longer do you think MBA students are going to be able to do this, as to forgo the traditional route and wait till late in the season to look into these types of companies?
I actually think that there's going to be a shortage of talent to the year 2009 approximately. It's a demographic issue because there just aren't enough 35-year-old executives being born, not enough MBA students being born, obviously, because it takes a while for people to go through all their education and then go through the university. So I believe that it's actually going to last a while.
I can't see as far out as 2009. I have no idea what the shortage is going to be like then. I do know that what you're experiencing right now is a very hot economy. And if that economy has a significant downturn in 6 months, everything's going to change dramatically. And in my mind, it's not probably 2 or 3 years. It's probably more like 18 months.
Let's take one more question, the last question.
Hello, my name is Rhonda Green, and my question is, I heard you describe some of the characteristics that you're looking for in a CEO, but I didn't hear you say entrepreneurship or entrepreneur tendencies. So I would like both of you to please define what you feel an entrepreneur is.
I think vision, passion, stubbornness. I've found some of the best entrepreneurs to be people that are pretty stubborn people that, everyone tells them they can't do something, but they go ahead and do it anyway. Actually, that turns into a problem later on. They tend to be people that have a lot of energy. They're incredibly demanding. They're not always good listeners because their ideas many times are always the best ideas. You need to build something. You love to grow things, make things happen, and build something that never happened before. And I think also there's a need in most entrepreneurs to create a bit of a legacy.
I would actually latch on to the dreamer component. I think that's one of the most critical elements to being a successful entrepreneur. And it doesn't necessarily match up with being a successful CEO. I think, in fact, sometimes having an entrepreneurial characteristic for a CEO is a detriment inside many organizations because they really won't have the opportunity to exploit it.
We have come to the end of our hour. My thanks to the faculty and the students of Carnegie Mellon's Graduate School of Industrial Administration. And if they've been listening closely to our guests, they just may have gotten a head start on their search for gainful employment. So our special thanks go to Gary Goldstien, Chairman and CEO of Headway Corporate Resources, and to Jeffrey Christian, Chairman and CEO of Christian & Timbers. Now, I hope our program has contributed something to the world's marketplace of ideas, because that is the business of CEO Exchange. I'm Jeff Greenfield. Thank you. Happy hunting.
If you really think about what these companies do, they don't have customers anymore.
Okay.
They are totally proprietary.
Okay. I think you got to go to Silicon Valley.
Okay.
I don't think there's any. I think you've got to stay there because everything is happening. I mean, you can't do deals. You can't do strategic partnerships. All you have to do is like meet me at Bucks.
There are probably a dozen things you really look for. You've got to be a good listener. You've got to be patient. I think this impatient thing doesn't work for a CEO.
But I think the best CEOs are those that do it instinctively. I think when someone says, what is it that really allows one CEO to succeed against the other? I think it's really hiring great people.
And I do believe that I see a lot of people making big mistakes, jumping on the so-called bandwagon as though it's going to end tomorrow.
You network everybody. Who should I know? Who should I talk? Write down names. Don't ever miss an opportunity to get networked.